Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Verdant Revolution. This will be Part 5, Chapter 5, entitled Oracles of Hephaestus and Apollo. Startled, Izuku took a step back from the charging girl. Why on earth was there someone charging him? And flailing a wrench around in the air to top it off. As startled as he was, Izuku had still drilled the response into his body and didn't need to think about it when he prepared to step forward and disarm the girl. Before he could, the girl's foot caught on a piece of stray metal and sent her careening face first into the sand, sliding to a stop just in front of Izuku. Izuku waited a moment, and when the girl twitched, lifting her head to glare at him, he coughed. "Well, that was certainly something. Are you all right, miss?" Izuku addressed the girl, now at his feet. The girl stood up in her skid mark, dusting herself off before striking a pose. "I am the one and only Hatsume Mei. Remember the name because I'll soon be the biggest name in hero support, and you're the one that's stealing all my project scrap." Hatsume swung her wrench at Izuku, missing when he sidestepped her. He began explaining to her while lazily dodging her rambunctious flailing, sending sand skittering across the beach with each movement. "First of all, Miss Hatsume, this beach is an illegal dumping ground, and I'm doing my best to clean it up. While I am using this as a strength training, you are more than welcome to join me out here and take whatever you would like with you, as once again, I am cleaning it up. Besides that, it is scrap, as you pointed out. It doesn't have an owner any longer, and you aren't the only one that needs parts." Hatsume froze mid-swing at that, breathing deeply, eyes narrowing at Izuku, her crosshair pupils dilating back and forth as she scanned over his body. She took him in carefully, toned muscle that was just shy of screaming jacked, even if he was on the light side. Grit and grime in his nail beds with calluses forming on his hands and fingers. His skin was spattered with grime, oil, and grease from cleaning. She took in the parts peeking out of Izuku's bag. Though she didn't generally admit it, he looked good. Not in the, "oh my god, he's so attractive" kind of way. Not that she didn't think that rippling muscle and motor grease was attractive, but in the clearly he's working on something and he knows his stuff kind of way. She lowered her wrench to the side, placing it back into her tool belt. "I may just do that. You said others needed scrap too. I've come here for parts for a while and I've not seen anyone else. That leaves you the one needing parts as the others part of that. Am I right? Another inventor." Hatsume had slid from aggressive to cool. If she was going to have a competitor scrapping from the same place, then she would certainly need to keep an eye on them. Besides that, she couldn't let him get to all the good stuff first. There had to be some treasures buried in those mountains. "I suppose you can call me that." Izuku rubbed the back of his head, frowning. "I'm working on some gear plans for getting into the hero course, but I'm running into roadblocks. Most of my knowledge lies in the biological sciences, not the mechanical, so some of the pieces I need to prepare for some of the gear is a struggle to create." He felt a chill run up his spine and focused his attention back onto Hatsume, from where he had been thinking about his blueprints. Her gaze, at some point, went from the cold analytical stare that it had been to some kind of hungry animal sizing him up for dinner. She grabbed him suddenly and started feeling him up and muttering to herself. "Whoa there!" Izuku backed out of her grasp quickly, a noticeable heat rising to his cheeks. "Just what exactly do you think you're doing?" Hatsume smiled a wide, feral smile. "You're going to be a hero," she said, as if it was the most obvious answer in the world. "I'm going to be a hero support technician, and luckily for you, my specialty is in the realm of mechanics." She grabbed Izuku's arm again, dragging him along. "Come, we have to get to my workshop. I have so many babies I can show you. We have to make so many babies if we're going to get you into the hero course." "Wait, what?" Izuku slammed his feet into the sand. "I have no problem with going to your workshop and talking gear, but what the hell is this about babies?" Hatsume released him and pulled what looked suspiciously like a collapsible baton from her tool belt. Flicking her wrist, she extended it, and after pressing the button on the base of it, it turned out Izuku was right. It was a baton. This baton, however, was clearly electrified. The entire body of the baton crackled with lightning as Hatsume cackled. "This is one of my best babies so far. Most stun batons cap out somewhere around 9 million volts, but I've managed to not only double the volts and then some. It comes in at just around 20 million volts while keeping the amperage down below the .2 lethal threshold. But I've also managed to electrify the entire rod rather than just the tip." Hatsume babbled about her electrified rod, while Izuku's sweat dropped from the crackling power far too close for comfort. "You call your inventions your babies. It wasn't so much a question, as Izuku had gotten that much, but more of a statement of disbelief that he had managed to run into someone that was both insane enough and smart enough to help him with what he needed to do. Obviously, now let's get going! Before Hatsume could grab him again, Izuku dipped back out of the way. Let me grab my stuff, and we'll stop by your workshop before I head home, Izuku was planning. She was strange, that much wasn't even a question. She was obsessed with her babies, as she put it, to the extent that she swung a wrench at his head when she thought he was going to impede her ability to create. She was clearly intelligent if the portable lightning rod of hers was any indication. She was off on the voltage for an actual lightning bolt, but not helping. He was digressing, and he needed to think. If she was capable of that, then he may be able to use her mechanical knowledge to supplement his own, while he learned. He may just be able to get a business partner out of it as well. She wanted to stay in support, it would seem, and he wouldn't have time as a hero to run all the tests he wanted quickly once he had a license. Certainly something for the future. Izuku picked up his bag full of parts and, after a second of thought, picked up an old abused guitar that had been resting against a wall. It had certainly seen better days. It was scuffed to all hell, the finish on it was wearing off, and several of the strings would need to be replaced, but it was still serviceable. Some sandpaper, some new finish, new stain, new strings. Assuming nothing crazy was wrong with it, it would be good to be able to play again. It would certainly help to keep his mind from wandering. He forcibly stopped that thought line there. All right, Hatsume, let's see this workshop of yours. If Izuku was honest, he had expected a garage with some workbenches, maybe some gadgets strewn around, and a few blueprints hanging from the walls, something similar to what his workshop was creeping towards. What he was met with was similar but more advanced. Hatsume had a series of machines that would prove useful to her work and a forge against the left wall upon walking in. Straight ahead, the wall was covered in shelves of gadgets, parts, and blueprints. The right wall had piles of scrap against it and what looked like a sad futon that was kind of half resting against the wall, half sagging to the ground. Izuku got the feeling that the futon saw more use than Hatsume's actual bed. The floor was concrete, which was only discernible by either feeling it beneath you or by looking at the edges of the room, as the center of the room's concrete had been long singed black from what appeared to be blast marks. The walls were plain, besides the blueprints, gadgets, and plethora of sound-dampening pads. Welcome to Casa de la Hatsume. I have almost everything I could want right now in this workshop. I'll have access to better materials and machines once I get into UA, of course, but for now this'll do. Izuku quirked his eyebrow at her when she spun in a circle to look at him. Home of the Hatsume. Just how much time do you spend here that you refer to it as home? Hatsume threw her hands in the air, with a grin on her face. All of it! Now, let's get your measurements. I want to adjust a few of my babies. While I do that, you sketch out some of your designs that you want my help with or advice on. Hatsume wasted absolutely no time in pulling at Izuku's bag and rushing him to set his things down. He smiled for the first time in a while. He couldn't help it. Her single-minded energy was absolutely infectious. All right, Hatsume. Let's get to work then. By the time Izuku had finished at Hatsume's workshop, the sun was dipping just under the horizon. Its orange hue had long since lost its luster and slipped instead into deep lilac and azure rays, streaking through a steadily darkening sky. He chuckled a bit, thinking about his appearance and what others must think of him right now. His hair was pulling itself out of where he had tied it back and was sticking up in multiple places. He was covered in any number of substances ranging from oil to grease to soot, from the innumerable explosions that Hatsume somehow managed to cause. Izuku smiled and shook his head, chuckling. How does one even manage to light pneumatic tubing on fire? He had no idea, and likely never would. The walk back home was calming for Izuku. The explosions had set him on edge, even if he had enjoyed the experiments. He had agreed to bring some of his blueprints for them to work on the next time he could stop by. Hatsume had gotten all starry-eyed when he had shown her sketches of a compact wrist-mounted crossbow and grappling hook design that he was blueprinting. Hopefully I'll be able to convince her to let me use her forge at some point. Gun laws have come a long way in Japan since the mid-2000s and the early 21st. It's not impossible to get a handgun and carry permit here anymore. I suppose that's one thing I can thank quirks for. Even if they stunted our growth as a species, at least they made guns seem like useless toys, which couldn't be further from the truth, frankly. Pretty sure except for a few %, most don't have a quirk to deal with a subsonic round, much less a supersonic one. Even still, it would be far easier to cast my own parts after carving a resin model. I doubt I'll find one to my taste here. Hatsume and I would need to make serious progress before I go trusting her with potentially world-changing technologies. The fusion reactors, battery tech to go with, and a lot of my gear will have to wait until I'm sure I can partner with her through it all. I'm sure as hell not trusting a slightly crazy stranger with rail weapons, even if she does seem nice. Izuku shifted his bag on his right shoulder, while his left hand held the sad guitar, as he stepped up to the door of his home. He had managed to get the sandpapering done while bouncing ideas with Hatsume in her workshop, but it still needed a new finish and stained along with a new set of strings. When he entered, he found his mother asleep at the table waiting for him. She looked calm in her sleep without any of the stress that he had initially seen when he first had come home from the hospital. She worries far too much about me. It's good to see her resting like this. She deserves a good life after what she's put up with to get here. Gently, Izuku put down his bag and the newly sanded guitar before picking his mother up and carrying her back to her room to sleep in her bed. When he returned with a smile on his lips, he picked up his bag before looking around. The smile slid away, and his eyes slipped into ice as he was reminded of Hisashi. I do think that I'll find out what you've been up to, father dearest. Izuku returned to his room after setting his bag and the guitar in his workshop. Sitting down at his computer, he got to work setting up the same encryption scheme and proxy that they'd used in the Black Cats. Admittedly, he had to make some minor adjustments owing to the different architecture of the devices, but he made do. Not quite as perfect as Sergeant Reed would have set up, but then again, I'm pretty sure that man could have brought every nation here on Earth to their knees within a week, so that'll have to suffice. The thought caused a sad smile to twitch at Izuku's lips. The man had been a genius amongst geniuses when it came to technology. The image of a bloody vest flashed across his eyes, a kind face with a head of blonde hair shaped into a faux hawk, bright blue eyes, staring up into his own emerald with a smile. He yelled at the man to stay with him. His hands were covered in blood as he desperately tried to stop the bleeding. So much blood that it was everywhere, up his arms, covering his vest, pulling below the communication sergeant's back. Even if his medical training told him it was too late, he couldn't stop trying, couldn't lose another black cat. Izuku snapped back to the present with a shuddering breath and a sprint to the bathroom. Desperately, he ran cold water over his pale, clammy skin. As he looked into the mirror, he could still see the horrors that lurked behind his eyes. He clenched them shut and focused on his breathing. His hands shook, even as he used them to splash more cold water on his face. He couldn't think of that now. He had work to do, and it wouldn't help anyone if he thought of that now. He took one last shuddering breath before drying his face and hands. By the time Izuku had sat back down, he was once again focused on his task. He'd start with the telecommunications servers. He'd get any record of communication between his mother and Hisashi. If he was simply reading too much into the situation and was violating her privacy for nothing, then he would drop it there. But if he found what he expected, he would then move on to Island servers. Those would be a little harder to manage since the security supposedly rivaled the supposedly non-existent, clearly existent prison Tartarus. Even if it was technically supposed to be a secret facility, it had long since been exposed to the public. But much like Guantanamo Bay, in the 21st, people would prefer to simply look away rather than confront the harsh truth of what their society did to villains. If Izuku found what he expected to find, then Hisashi would wish that he was in Tartarus rather than Island. Izuku glanced at his clock when he heard his mother getting up for the day. Quietly, he saved and then closed the information documents he had been compiling. 8 in the morning, and what he had found since he began digging had caused him to long since past disgust. He had long since passed rage. Now what sat within him was a cold fury that would make Hisashi rue the day he was ever born. While his mother and Hisashi had talked a bit since the coma, for the most part, almost all communication had ceased from him. As it turned out, when his mother had said that she was told not to worry about him, what had actually happened is that there was a long argument regarding their quirkless child finally becoming less of a problem for everyone. From there, what he found only spiraled. The man was a quirkist asshole that loved lording his power over his department. From the video camera footage he had managed to strip out of their mainframes, it turned out that the man was sleeping with at least 3 members of said department. That's not even to mention the other dozen or so violations of his contract, much less human decency. The man wouldn't be getting away with his actions or behavior, even if he had to fly to the damn island himself to wring his neck. Deep breaths. You can't do anything about it now. Just catalog and compile his actions. You'll get your chance to deal with him. You left your monitor on their servers before you got booted by their security systems. You'll have plenty to crucify him with soon enough." Izuku stepped out into the kitchen and hugged his mother from behind. She was debating what to make for breakfast when he slipped up behind her. Inko was momentarily startled before realizing it was Izuku. "Well, aren't you up early today? What do you want for breakfast today, Izu?" Izuku shook his head and ushered her towards the living room. "I'll make breakfast this morning. You go sit and drink your coffee." Inko sputtered slightly at the forceful way that she was ejected from her kitchen. But she certainly wasn't going to argue with Izuku making breakfast. Wait, when did he learn how to cook? Has he been paying that much attention to what I've been doing? Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Izuku quickly took stock of what he had to work with and started cooking. High protein would be good, considering his routine. When he had finished the cooking, he brought it out to his mother at the table. "Eggs with furikake, a small salad, and a miso soup. I'm certain it isn't as good as your cooking, Mom, but I thought you might want to be the one cooked for once." Inko smiled at her son. "It smells delicious, honey. I'm sure it'll be great." She and Izuku dug into their breakfast, making small talk while doing so. She spoke of some of the dishes she'd been perfecting at work in preparation of adding them to the menu. When asked, Izuku spoke of what his schedule looked like for the day. He'd do a bit more schoolwork, probably finish out his junior year before the end of the week, before heading out to the beach to continue his work. "I'll likely head off to the beach earlier than usual from now on. I met someone yesterday, and we spent some time working on some designs at her workshop. I'm hoping I'll be able to make a business partner out of her in the future. After that, I'll likely head over to the local music store in the next couple of days to pick up some strings for a guitar that I've been working on Izuku cut off when he looked up from his food to find his mother staring at him wide-eyed. Before he could ask what was wrong, she cried out, "My Izuku has met a girl!" The Midoriya family tears had made their appearance. "When do I get to meet her? What is she like? What does she plan on doing in the future? You have to tell me everything." Inko was cut off by Izuku laughing. A smile spread across his face. Mom, stop." Izuku tried to rein in his laughter. Catching his breath, he continued. "Nothing is going on. She's tentatively a friend at most right now. Like I said, I hope I'll be able to make her my business partner in the future. I can answer a few of those questions, though. I don't know when you'll get to meet her, as I'm not sure she spends much, if not the minimum time outside of her workshop than is required of her. She's passionate, is the word I'll use, about her work." Izuku decided it would be best to leave out precisely how they had met. "She is planning on becoming a hero support technician, which is why she latched onto me. She knows I plan on becoming a hero and wants to work with me to make us both the best in our fields." Inko had frozen at the mention of the hero course. Her smile became tense, and barely did Inko manage not to let it turn into a frown. Izuku spoke softly when he saw this, his tone turning more serious and somber, his smile becoming smaller but at the same time soft as well. "I know you don't like the idea, Mom. I'm sorry that I worry you, and don't deny that it's a major concern of yours." Izuku shook his head. "No, I know you worry about my safety, that you worry if I take this path, I'll get myself seriously injured or worse because of my lack of a quirk. But, Mom, I can't help but take the path that'll let me save the most lives, help the most people." Inko opened her mouth to respond, but once again, Izuku shook his head. "I know what you're going to say. Why not the police? Why not be a doctor? I got Hisashi's intelligence from him, so why not become a support technician like my friend?" Izuku let those questions hang in the air for a moment. "I've already thought about those questions, Mom. And they aren't the path for me. The police would just be as dangerous, while, unnoticed, they are still at the scene of every hero operation. I can't just help people after they've been injured, so being a doctor is out. Not that I won't pursue that route to some degree, it just can't be the only thing I do." Izuku let the implications of that sink in. Inko didn't try to say anything this time. She stared into Izuku's eyes, so emerald like her own, searching for something. Some hint of hesitation she could use, could play off to keep her son safe. Izuku reached across the table now, and took her hands into his own. "I can't promise you that I'll always come back home safe. I won't lie to you. I can't promise that I'll always be safe when I'm in the field. My first priority will always be an innocent civilian's safety and survival before my own." Inko watched as her son's eyes saw something in the distance that she couldn't. Those familiar emerald eyes were now far older than they had any right to be. When he spoke with an experience that was impossible for him, yet it was there. The gravity of his words hung in the air. "The job I'm planning on performing isn't safe, you're right. Any number of things could happen, but I can't leave an innocent person in a situation when I could do something about it. What I can promise you Izuku squeezed his mother's hands as he took a deep breath, surfacing from whatever memory he was in. Is that at the end of the day, I'll do my best to come back. I'll do my best to make sure everyone gets out safe. This is my home, and that is always worth fighting for. Always worth protecting. Anko fought the urge to cry, to beg him to please reconsider, to take some safe position in a remote hospital for her. But she couldn't. She could see his face when the doctor had diagnosed him quirkless, could still see his face when she said she was sorry that night. Sorry for so many things. The Izuku she saw in front of her now, though, wasn't the same scared young boy he used to be. He had grown so much without her even noticing it. He had made up his mind, and while a few tears slipped out, she couldn't, no, wouldn't discourage him any further. All right, Inko managed to choke out the word around her emotions. Be careful, okay? That's all I suppose I can ask of you. Both Midoriyas gave each other sad smiles before his mother processed something that came before the darker turn to their conversation. What do you mean done with your junior year? All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 5. I'm splitting this one up because of the length, and it's a good breaking point for this chapter. The second half to this one will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this. I really like the conversation between Izuku and his mom in this one. I really like the author's continued references to the wisdom and the age in Izuku's eyes and how that shines through. I think that's really a nice way of conveying that there's a haunting to the stuff that he's dealing with from his past life, basically. So it's really nice to see those types of tidbits and things getting thrown in as well. So let me know your overall thoughts and reactions to everything so far. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.